whatever reason, that school grabbed me. And I just couldn't get over the fact that I couldn't understand why nobody else cared. For years, I would say, why doesn't anyone else care about this? There have to be people here who are interested in history, who are interested in justice, who are interested in just our community. Why does no one care about this?
We know there was an African-American community in Stillwater, basically from the beginning of Stillwater. There's always been African-American residents here. And their community used to be centered right around that area. And if you look at it now, there's very few remnants of the built environment that represent that history. So a lot of people would say it's important to save the school because it's a physical representation of a community that was displaced.
I was very young at Washington School. I went to kindergarten, first grade, and I think I was there second grade. And I live right next to the school, so behind the school on the corner is where I lived in that house, so I could just cut through the fence and get to the school. I remember the playground. I remember learning how to read. It was just a day with my friends.
I went there first through ninth, and I tell you what, I didn't graduate from there, but I enjoyed everything about Washington School, every teacher. We loved, we had to respect whether they did or didn't. There was no discipline problems at Washington School. And you know the reason? Because when our parents told us what we had to do and how we had to act, that was carried through all the way down that road, not just when you got to the school.
But I think that my experience at Washington was great because I think they had caring teachers. Of all the teachers, Anna Mae Robinson, Thelma Langley Burns, Ruth Johnson, all the teachers that I can name, I think they really cared for the students and provided them the best education they could. We probably didn't have the best of this, the best of that, but in terms of teaching the subject matter and caring for the children, because they wouldn't hesitate to talk to parents if a child misbehaved, and the parents and students and teachers worked very close together.
They taught them how to read. That was one thing that the city would do. Somehow they gave them library books. So they always had books, and the teachers always taught, and they always taught from the beginning. They didn't let you be a victim of a circumstance.
But they usually refer to the area around where Miss Bailey lived as the Ville. I really don't know where the name came from, but when you use that terminology, you knew that you were talking about pretty much African American community, people who lived in that area.
The boundaries of the Ville are within about 9th to 14th Streets, and then up as far as Duck and down like Hester, No Block Streets, kind of in that area. And if you talk to alumni about their experience, they'll just kind of tell you, well, we knew we weren't supposed to go across 9th Street.
They didn't care how young you were. They didn't care how beautiful you were. They didn't care what you did in life. They weren't interested. They just wanted to make you feel like they were superior over you, and that's it. And they got it across because we stayed in our neighborhood.
Today I want to say to the people of America and the nations of the world that we are not about to turn around.
Yes, sir.
We are on the move now.
Yes, sir.
Yes, we are on the move, and no wave of racism can stop us.
Yes, sir.
Dr. King, how are things shaping up now for tomorrow?
Things are shaping up beautifully.
Well, were you allowed to venture out by yourself very often in Stillwater, like to go to town?
We'd go like to the movie theater, which we didn't have but one movie, and we had to sit upstairs. There were 12 seats for blacks, and that's the only place we could go to the movie.
Remember when it was a 5 and Dime on Main, and they had a eating place in there. The blacks couldn't sit. You could go in there and buy something, but you couldn't sit at the counter.
And whenever we ventured out, there was always some negative remark hollered out or something. So we've been through that part of that. But you know what? Because we were all taught that love always is better than hate.
They took pride in being able to exist in an environment that some may have thought was bad or wanted to be bad. No, it wasn't a good thing. There was no equality there. But they took pride in making the best of it.
At that time, the schools hadn't been integrated.
Right.
So we were predominantly in this area. But we took care of each other. If you did something to one of us, you got to get us all. That's just the way we work.
You didn't have to worry about my kids going across the street to play with somebody over there because they know that people over there are going to be watching too, and the people further down going to be watching too. So it was just a thing that, a domino effect. That's what it was.
The thing that comes up again and again and again when you talk to alumni about attending the school is that they describe it as the beating heart of that community. So there were, houses and businesses, there were things that radiated out around Washington School, but it was the center. Integration, on the one hand, is a positive thing, right? It represents steps forward, it represents progress. That's sort of the way we think about it and talk about it. But it also meant breaking apart a community that had been really close for a long time.
So I'm trying to figure out, because they'd always say the Ville, why they say the Ville, what's over there on 9th Street. So I had a lot of questions from my mom. So she would explain to me, we had to stay on this side or whatever. And she'd always tell me, she said, now you're gonna go to a school, there's gonna be some white kids, everybody's the same, or treat anybody different. But it was different because even here, there was no white kids. So I didn't see my white friends until integration started. So she tried to prepare me, okay, now we're finna go to a place where everybody doesn't look like you. And I just remember when I went there, the one thing that stands out to me, I was the only one in my class. So it's like, where's all my friends? So the whole room was full of white students and I was a black student.
That displacement happened later on in like the 1960s, 70s, 80s, as programs like urban renewal came through, and that area floods quite frequently. And so on the one hand, it's, some of that removal was meant to benefit the people who lived there by getting them into houses that didn't flood all the time and that were maybe in better locations geographically. But then it also removed a sense of community where suddenly they weren't living next to each other anymore, and it really changed how people interacted with each other.
All of us lived in different places, so it wasn't the same when all the houses was here And my mom could say, I'm gonna be late, you go over to so-and-so's house till I get home, or we just played. We couldn't do that because they sprinkled us in Stillwater. So it's like, okay, what seemed to be a good thing at the time wasn't as good in time. So it sort of separated us.
One of the things that urban renewal tends to do is cut through minority communities or communities that are already on the periphery a little bit and locate roads through them. So those communities get sort of dislocated, relocated in order to make space. And I wouldn't say that that's necessarily the drive behind it in Stillwater. In Stillwater, urban renewal really has a lot to do with the flooding. Right? So that area around Washington School that gets really badly inundated when there's a flood, it's just incredibly difficult to try and build houses that are in that area but out of the floodplain.
I remember them coming and getting some families out with a canoe, because when the families didn't leave with the flood warning, they would have to come and get them in canoes.
So if you look at this floodplain, right, this is with the Army, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers mapping out the floodplain. Basically, the African American community is right sort of here in this area, and Washington School is like right smack in the deepest point of this floodplain.
A lot of the park here was houses when I came up. So we were at each other's houses. We had a center over there on the corner, which we went to after school, the rec center. We would go there after school, but people lived in all this land. So we were between one house to the other, just playing. So they split up our family. So when they split it up, they had agreed to give them the rec center back, but they didn't. But the community didn't know how or whatever to go and fight sort of for the school.
It stayed in private ownership for a very, very long time. I'd always told my husband, if we ever win the lottery, I'm buying Washington School and we're doing something with it. This is what I said for over a decade. I drove everyone nuts for probably 10, 15 years. Just because, I mean, every time I was somewhere with the mayor, I'd be like, hey, Washington School. So it was just one of those things where for whatever reason, it got under my skin and I couldn't forget about it and I couldn't let it go. And after a few years ago, I left the newspaper and I went to work for the city of Stillwater in the communications department. And I will never forget the day Norman McNichol, who was the city manager at the time, walked in my office and he said, I've got something to tell you. And it was like a secret still at that point. They had not announced it. And he told me that the city had been able to buy Washington School. And I'm tearing up right now because I cried that day.
I began working to try to get the building back into the city's hands and managed to do that in 22. There was a generous benefactor that paid $250,000, and then the current owner also got some tax breaks for the building. And we have been working ever since to try to restore the original part of it.
And I didn't go there. My family isn't from here, but for whatever reason, that school grabbed me. And I just couldn't get over the fact that I couldn't understand why nobody else cared. For years, I would say, why doesn't anyone else care about this? There have to be people here who are interested in history, who are interested in justice, who are interested in just our community. Why does no one care about this? Well, it was because Dr. Arata wasn't here yet.
Always be ever grateful to Dr. Arata. She lived down here in the Ville, which wasn't totally uncommon anymore, but still you don't see a lot of white people that live here. So she walked by the school and she inquired. So her inquiry got us back on the map of interest for the city.
So I first knew Washington School as just this abandoned building that I would walk by, and it's a beautiful old building. So that was my first interest, was just wondering about this building and why it was abandoned. And I've learned more about it since then, and it's been a really enriching and meaningful project to work on it over the years.
I mean, when you see the students that come from different walks of life, they have no clue maybe about the folks that came before them, but they feel a sense of obligation, they feel a sense of compassion, they feel a sense of appreciation of, hey, I might be chipping away at this one brick, but I'm helping prepare this space for the next generation.
Saving Washington School is a way that we can do that and share that with future generations who don't remember what that area looked like before a certain time.
The whole goal is to make it to be a community facility and have where you can do a wedding, they can have classes, they can do training, they can do tournaments. But when they come to the building, there's history to be told.
We want an element, we want a place to document and to preserve the history of Washington School, to tell the story of Washington School. And that is ultimately the vision. The lot is cleared off, it's landscaped, it's beautiful, it's green. You've got this beautiful old T-shaped brick building that's all clean and it looks lovely, and you walk in and you have these nice spaces that you can use for meetings or classes or whatever you need, with an exhibit that tells about Washington School and all the great things that were there. And also by extension, the Black community in Stillwater.
We don't want a boring museum, but we want the story told. And the story told in a creative way that when they're using the building, they can get that information or get that history. So the more we can get the history out, because it was such an amazing history, is our goal. And I think we're trying to be as creative as possible to have that available once we get the school redone.
There's a deeper history and a richer history there than I think a lot of people know about. And at a really fundamental level, it's impossible to honor a history we don't know about. We have to first know it was there. And a lot of alumni from Washington School went on to attend college. Quite a few people went to Langston. There were alumni of Washington School who became doctors and lawyers and dentists, who joined the Army and served with distinction during the Korean War, Vietnam. So there was that real sense of pride in producing good citizens.
You don't need to be a victim. You just need to be willing and motivated and believe in yourself, believe in God, and you'll be all right. And that's what they wanted everybody to know. We did it. We're not these people that was discriminated against, that was thrown all together. We're survivors. So they didn't want to be known as that. So they would be very happy, very humble, and very appreciative. And they would thank God, because they figured one day, they always thought one day, and they believed one day it would happen, and they all knew that I may not be here. But one day, they thought God would make a difference.